Hey, everybody, hope sorry, a couple minutes late on this Wednesday evening. Horrible weather outside. It's cold, nasty. Yeah. Anyway, I'm here and hope you're doing fine and well wherever you are. And for another, I think hopefully a very interesting session. Today we're going to talk about handling complaints and issues. Let me get the folks down on Instagram in first. Let's see. I think they are live now. Yes. So Instagram's on the house and so on. So I thought I'll do a session on handling complaints. And if you have tenants, then every now and then you will have some issues and some challenges and some complaints you're going to have to deal with. Hopefully, you got a reasonable tenant who you can do business with, as opposed to a difficult tenant. Before I get too far, I thought I'll weigh in on the. It was a big deal here in the Washington D.C. area last week. We had this lady. I don't know if you heard about the story. She booked an Airbnb in at this property in Washington, and for 30 days. And after 30 days, she contacted the owner and said, "Hey, can we do a side deal where I'll stay here, and then we don't have to go through Airbnb. I'll just pay you directly." And so the owner, you know, agreed, and that was the last payment that the tenant ever made, or this prospective guest ever made. And so she was in there for about almost, I don't know, 8 to 10 months. I think it was 8 months. I think it was altogether. And she didn't pay a dime. She was exercising her tenant rights as a tenant, as rather than as a guest. So the moral of that story is a lot of different things. Well, I'm glad that the owner was able to get the tenant out of there, or this person. But it really shows a loophole that unscrupulous people can use. When they go in as an Airbnb undercover, and after 30 days, many jurisdictions they have quote unquote tenant rights. And so I think the mistake that the owner did was to have a side deal. And obviously, if she wanted to go into an extended relationship with this person, then she probably should have screened her, which I don't think she did. But again, that's probably a topic for another day. It's all about screening, knowing who's in your house, and because you do have a lot of people, who unfortunately, have hidden agendas, and they're how's it sheep in wolves' clothes, or wolves in sheep's clothes, or whatever that saying goes. Anyway, but that's maybe I'll talk about that another time. But if you want to weigh in on that one, please put comments in the chat box and I'll get to that. So anyway, today we're going to talk about handling complaints. Hopefully, you haven't had too many of those, but you will. And I think it's an appropriate topic because it's one of those things. You're dealing with human beings, and human beings are very complicated, and they have complex issues, and you have to be able to manage those issues as time goes by. So I suppose, as usual, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat box, and I'll get to you in about 20 minutes or so. If you want to book a one-on-one session with me, by all means, go to my website. And we're doing some updates to the website, so it may not be working right now. But you can book a one-on-one, and then we can kind of take it from there. So, okay, let's get into it. So, are tenant complaints quietly draining your time, energy, and long-term results, or returns, I suppose, without you realizing it? So for many residential real estate investors, tenant complaints feel like background noise. Dealing with is annoying, it can be distracting, and really it's unavoidable. Yet time and time again, investors discover that these quote unquote small issues are the very things that determine whether a portfolio operates smoothly or becomes a source of constant stress. If you have a portfolio, it can overtake you, and it becomes a hassle, and it can be very, very stressful. So complaints about maintenance delays, inspections, communication breakdowns, or even neighbor disputes are rarely isolated events. They don't just happen by accident. It's usually there are signals that expose the strength or weaknesses of a investors' operating system. So, if you have too many complaints, it means that something is going on in your environment that you probably need to address yourself. So, investors who struggle most often underestimate the cumulative impact of unresolved or poorly handled complaints. One delayed response by you can turn into frustrations from the tenant. Frustrations become mistrust. Mistrust leads to non-payment, failed inspections, regulatory scrutiny. You get, the city or the county or the local government will contact you and say, hey, what's going on? We've heard about this. We've received a complaint. And so the cumulative impact of unresolved or poorly handled complaints. So one delayed response turns into frustration. And as I said, it turns into mistrust, and mistrust can lead to non-payment, failed inspections, and regulatory scrutiny, or even turnover. So your portfolio doesn't collapse overnight. No, it erodes slowly. So many unsuccessful investors only recognize the damage after cash flow tightens, like you're not getting the money, and burnout sets in. You just get too stressed out. So by contrast, investors who build a durable, scalable portfolio learn to see complaints differently. How? Well, they recognize complaints as predictable events. It's going to happen that can be managed. It can be managed with clarity, consistency, and discipline. So rather than reacting emotionally or improvising solutions, they develop repeatable processes or repeatable responses that protect both the tenant relationship and the business. So handling complaints well is not just really a person. It's not really about personality or generosity. It's about operational maturity. You have to mature in these things. Sometimes it's just better to just let it go. Investors who master these skills free themselves to focus on growth, strategy, and long-term wealth. Creating the other person is obviously they're just constantly fighting fires. So as usual, I'm going to break the topic down to 6 parts. And so let's get going. So number 1, setting expectations. That's usually a very, very important part. It's really the start, especially during the move-in phase of your tenant. So the question is, are tenant complaints actually about problems or about expectations that were never clearly set? Did you not set expectations when the tenant moves in? Possibly. A significant percentage of tenant complaints or originate not from serious property issues, but really from unmet or misunderstood expectations. Tenants had certain expectations, landlord had certain expectations. There was a misunderstanding of expectations. Many investors assume that tenants, kind of know the ropes. They know how rentals work, only to discover later on that assumptions are breeding ground for frustrations. You can't assume anything. You got to educate people. You got to tell them. You got to explain. So when expectations around maintenance timelines, communications channels, inspections, and responsibilities are vague, tenants fill in the gaps themselves, often incorrectly. What is your response time for, when there are problems, when there are maintenance issues, when you need to reach out to? Is it a certain time of the day, certain time of the night? What is considered an emergency and what's considered just regular, maintenance. So investors who struggled often relied on informal expectations or explanations or verbal assurances. Over time, those explanations changed depending on the situation, the tenant, or the investor's mood. So you really have inconsistency, and it's really this inconsistency creates confusion and perceptions of unfairness. Okay, so tenants felt ignored or feel ignored. That's a common one, or even misled, while investors feel blindsided by complaints they believe were unreasonable. So successful investors learn that expectations must be explicit, written, and repeated. I explain to my tenants on the day of moving what they can expect from me and what what I'm looking for from them. Okay, I try to set the expectations in terms of responsiveness, in terms of access and communications with myself. I go through that on the day of moving. I try to reinforce that throughout the relationship. We clearly communicate things like what consists what constitu- what constitutes an emergency, how repairs are requested, how do they explain to you or contact you regarding repairs, how long different types of issues typically take to resolve, and what tenants are responsible for versus what the landlord's responsible for. So all those things are clearly communicated, at least I do anyway, during the move-in date. And I try to reinforce that throughout the relationship. So this clarity, it doesn't, eliminate complaints, no, but it can dramatically reduce escalations and misunderstandings. So, I try to, my opinion is that when expectations are clear, complaints become easier to manage because both parties are operating from the same baseline. Okay. So instead of debating what should happen or what should have happened, conversations focus more on what will happen next. Okay, so that's number one, talk about setting expectations. Number two, I'm going to talk about is systems over reactions. Systems over reaction. Okay, I think you understand where this is going. Are tenant complaints controlling your day, or is your system or your systems controlling the outcome? Do you have systems in place on how you handle certain things? So many investors who feel overwhelmed by tenant issues are not just dealing with more problems, they're dealing with fewer systems. Okay. Without structure, every complaint feels urgent and personal. Phone calls interrupt meetings, texts arrive at all hours of the night, decisions are made on the fly, often inconsistently. Over time, this reactive approach exhausts even the most impatient investor. Unsuccessful investors often handle complaints manually, relying on memory, goodwill, or improvisation. However, what this does, this leads to delayed responses, forgotten follow-ups, and even uneven treatment across tenants. Tenants learn that to escalate emotionally gets your attention. They scream, shout, fuss, fight, whatever, reinforcing a cycle of stress and urgency. Successful investors, however, we try to replace chaos with systems. Chaos with systems. What do I mean by that? We try to centralize complaints intakes. We try to standardize responses, and we try to track resolution timelines. So complaints are, become workflow items rather than emotional events. Systems create predictability for the investor and also for the tenant. And the key shift is really understanding the systems are not just sort of cold or impersonal. They are really designed to be protective, protect you, and also protect them, the tenants. So they allow investors to respond consistently, fairly, and calmly, especially under pressure. That's number two. So we talked about setting expectations. We've also talked about systems over reactions. And then number three, it's all about communications that de-escalate. Communications that de-escalate. Try to turn the temperature down. So does your communications calm situations or unintentionally make them worse? Does your communications calm situations or unintentionally make them worse? Okay. Well, communications is often the invisible accelerant behind tenant complaints. Investors who struggled frequently responded too quickly, too emotionally, or too defensively. Short messages meant to save time are interpreted as dismissive. Silence, meant to buy thinking time, was interpreted as neglect. Tone, not intent, kind of drove escalation. How the tonality of your voice, your messages, your communications. Successful investors, however, learned that more effective communications is deliberate, not reactive. We kind of acknowledge that concerns, and we try to deal with concerns promptly without immediately assigning blame or promising outcomes. A simple acknowledgement. Think like, I understand the concern that I'm reviewing. I understand your concerns, but I'm reviewing it right now. It can sometimes diffuse the situation before it gets escalated. And but the idea is that consistency matters and persuasion helps. The tenants may not really like your answer, but they respect predictable and calm response. Okay, so even firm boundaries, were accepted when delivered clearly and respectfully. Without an attitude, without a sense of, well, I'm the boss and you're just a tenant, and so on. So strong communications doesn't require lengthy sort of explanations. It requires clarity, neutrality, and follow through. So we're kind of halfway through. As usual, if you've got some questions, put them in the chat box. I'll get to them about 10 minutes from now. And if you want to book a one-on-one with me, you can go to my website. Well, the website, we're going to make some changes right now. So, but once that's done, you can go to my website and book a one-on-one with me. That's joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah.com. Let's keep on going to number 4, core of 6. Complaints, compliance, and inspections. Complaints, compliance, and inspections. So the question is, are tenant complaints quietly exposing you to financial or regulatory risk? Are tenant complaints quietly exposing you to financial or regulatory risk? Now, what do I mean by that? There's nothing worse. We're in winter now, and let's say your heating system doesn't work, or your power goes out, or whatever it is, and you contact the landlord, and the landlord doesn't return your calls. The tenant kind of interprets that they're being ignored and being dismissed. And so, if you're not careful, the next call you get is from the local, either the Section 8 office, or from the building department, or the code compliance office, or whoever. You're going to get a call from somebody in authority, regulations, and then you're going to hold. It's a downhill path from there. They're going to throw the book at you. They may fine you. They may tell the tenant, give them advice on what they can do to preserve their rights and so on. So, so some of the most damaging investor stories began with ignored or minimized complaints tied to things like health, safety, or inspections. So what felt like a quote unquote minor issue to you quickly turned into a failed inspection, payment hold, or compliance violation. Investors who didn't document responses or meet timelines found themselves scrambling under pressure. So unsuccessful investors often treated inspection-related complaints the same as cosmetic ones. No, they're not. They delayed action, argued technicalities, or underestimated the seriousness of the situation or seriousness of the issue. And the cost of these mistakes, rarely small. Once you get the authorities involved, it could be loss of income, loss of rent, strained agency relationships, or even legal exposure. So successful investors treated compliance-related complaints as high priority. If you get a notice from somebody in authority, you deal with it immediately. We try to document everything that we've done, how we responded, and also, kind of discuss, the inspection standards, what it is that they are looking for us to do. We didn't wait for enforcement. We didn't wait for them to give us a fine. No, we acted proactively. So handling complaints well in this area not only protects yourself, but also establishes credibility with the various agencies that you have to deal with. And number 5, boundaries and control. Boundaries and control. So the question, I suppose, is going to be, are you resolving tenant issues or training tenants to overstep your boundaries? Are you resolving tenant issues, or are you training tenants to overstep your boundaries? What do I mean by that? Well, many investors learn the hard way that being quote unquote too available or flexible sometimes creates problems, not fewer. Why? Well, when tenants could bypass systems, contact investors at any hour of the day or night, and if they shout loud enough, they get special treatment, then expectations quickly become distorted. Okay, boundaries are eroded and complaints really multiply. So unsuccessful investors often justify boundary violations as being, well, I'm just being nice. I'm just, understanding of the tenant situation and so on, which is all, nothing wrong with that. But just be careful that people can sometimes push the envelope. So over time, this led to resentment, exhaustion, and loss of control. Tenants who, tenants learn to be persistent, contact you directly without going through the normal processes can be very, very disruptive. So successful investors enforce boundaries consistently, and we also stay calm. We don't get too up and down. We respect tenants while protecting our own time and systems. And boundaries are created and designed to avoid problems and to reduce conflict. So firm boundaries, don't harm relationships. In many aspects, it stabilizes them. And then finally, number six, using complaints to strengthen your portfolio. The question is, what if tenant complaints were actually helping you build stronger business, helping you actually build a stronger business? Well, investors who matured in their approach eventually realized that complaints were feedback loops. Repeated complaints highlighted system failures, property weaknesses, or communications gaps. When addressed thoughtfully, these insights improved operations across the entire portfolio. And unsuccessful investors, kind of make the same mistakes after a while. They treat complaints as isolated annoyances, whereas successful investors see complaints as patterns, and you can adjust accordingly, and you can upgrade your systems, your processes, and also can help you improve your properties. So over time, these investors experience fewer complaints, higher retention, and more predictable cash flow. So complaints didn't just happen or disappear, they were stopped being more disruptive. So I think I'm pretty much done for tonight. I'll just wrap it up by saying this. In conclusion, anyway, are tenant complaints something you endure or something you've learned to matter? While handling tenant complaints and issues, it's not a side skill in residential real estate investing. No, it's not. It's a core, operating discipline. Complaints are inevitable. Chaos is not. Investors who fail to recognize this pay the heavy price through stress, turnover, and stalled growth. And those who succeeded learned something through this painful experience, and that is clarity, systems, communications, compliance, and boundaries transform complaints from liability into stabilizers. We protect, they sort of establish protected systems to protect your time, safeguard your cash flow, and also to allow you to grow your portfolio and be able to scale. So if long-term success is the goal, then mastering complaints isn't optional. It's really foundational. It really is very, very important. So take this subject very seriously. It's very important. You're dealing with human beings, so you're gonna have to deal with complaints, and your success is going to be very, very integrated with how you handle that and what systems you have in place to deal with these kind of issues and disturbances. Okay, so that's it for the education part. Let me just go through a few questions, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Dow 2 in Phoenix. Hope you're doing well, Dow 2. I'm sure the weather over there is a lot warmer than over here. I wish I was in Phoenix right now. Okay, so this got a question from Nestor Can. This is a three-part question. A few Section 8 tenants have been contacting me from the flyers I've been putting up around town. Okay, so far so good. I don't reveal the property's address on the flyer. I only add a picture of the property, a phone number, and let them know it's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath. Okay, so far so good. When people contact me, I let them know I would need their social security number and a picture of their driver's license to get started on a background check. They don't respond. Okay. Remember, I'm an out-of-town investor, Dr. Joe. A lot of these people are no-shows. So this is how I weed out those serious and those who are not. If you really want to take a tour of the property, okay. So let me see. I'm not too sure what the question is, Nestor, but let me see if I can break it down. So you got a property, and you're out of town. So and you got a flyer, and you put the property information on the flyer in terms of a picture, phone number, and how people can reach out to you. You let them know it's a 3 bedroom, 1 bath. Okay, it's on a flyer. Now I'm not sure what you do when people contact. So how? Okay, so you have a flyer, and I'm not sure how you pass this around. I don't know if this is an ad that you're placing, but anyway, you give some basic information on a flyer. I don't know how you're sharing this flyer. You handing it out to people? Is it being placed on a billboard somewhere, or in a grocery store, or church, or somewhere in the community so people can see it? Uh, okay, so when people contact me, I let them know I will need their social security number. Okay, this could be where the problem is, and a picture of their driver's license to get started on the background check. They don't respond. Okay, um, I mean, we're kind of in an environment where people get scammed. So, if you're asking people to share their social security number before they see a property, your property, then how do they know you're not a scammer as well? I certainly would not give my social security information to a stranger just based on some flyer. I personally wouldn't. And I think people are suspicious that you could be a scammer. So I normally give them an opportunity to see the property first. And once they've seen the property and they've expressed interest, then I tend to give them an application form. And the application form will require or request that they provide their, you personal information like their social security number, their current address, their telephone number, contact information, and things like that. But this is after they've seen the property, not before they've seen the property. Hopefully, if they've seen the property, then they're more motivated, and hopefully they're interested, and therefore they're more open to share their personal information. But I don't know if I would request that information if they hadn't seen the property. I think that could be a problem area, Nesta. Um, Now, you say you're out of town. I understand why. Well, I'm assuming you're asking for a social security number and ID to see the property. Um, if that's the case, then you could be in a catch-22 where people are leery of giving their personal information out, and because of that, they're not coming to see the property. So you're going to have to do something about that. What can you do? You can either have some local person who can show the property on your behalf. So after they've seen the property, then they can you can gather information about them so they can complete so you can complete your background search. That could be something. That's a fair middle ground. Then the question then becomes, do you have somebody local who can do that for you? Remember, I'm out of town investor. Okay, I think I've got that part. Yeah. So that's what I would suggest. It's the reality, Nestor, is that people are not going to be given or not going to be forthcoming of giving their personal information to a stranger. And I think that once they're hooked on your house, then they're more likely to want to share that with you because they're interested. I gave my suggestion about maybe having somebody local who can operate on your part, on your behalf, whether it be a local agent, whether it be a local property manager, or a trusted person, and so on. Because what you don't want is to go all the way there and there's a no show. That's a disaster. The other thing is to take a different approach, and that is what can you do about your property to make it more attractive, more appealing to the kind of tenants that you're looking for? What can you do? Because if you're not getting any traction, it could be that either your competition is a better deal than yours. It could be that there's something wrong about your house, whether it be the location, whether it be the house itself, or just the vibes that the ad is generating. You may want to take a more critical look at what you're doing to see if you can sort of address any issues as to why you're not getting many applications and so on. It could be a process issue, which I think it is. Okay, this is from Talto. How do you typically locate potential tenants? Do you list your unit on other sites outside of the affordable housing site? Okay, so Telltale or yeah, Tall 2 is asking this question. How do I typically find tenants? Well, I'm very aggressive. I advertise on Zillow. And I don't just put a simple ad. I make it a very, very attractive ad and hitting all the hot buttons that my ideal tier one tenant is looking for. I know I have competition from other landlords, so I try to differentiate my product from my competition, and that could be I stage my home to give you that emotional look. I try to present myself as a good landlord. I try to buy in property in areas where I can appeal to the type of tenants that I'm looking for, and I let them know that if you're interested in the house, I'm going to screen, and this is the screening process. So sometimes these professional tenants, if they know that you're going to be doing some extensive screening, they may get intimidated and not fill your application. So that's something I do. Advertising in Zillow. In Washington, D.C., the local housing authority have these meetups or meetings. They call them meet and lease, where landlords with homes to rent can connect to meet with tenants with vouchers who are looking for a home. And so I attend all of those. You may want to contact your local housing authority to find out where do they list or where do they tell their clients to go look for properties. Maybe you're advertising on the wrong platform, so that could be a case. And you just have to be aggressive. So I don't have much success with affordablehousing.com website, but I do put it there. It's a paid one. But I've had much more success with Zillow and also with the meet and lease, these local events where landlords can meet prospective tenants. Okay, I think that's about it for today. So, okay, so today I think we talked about handling tenant complaints, and I kind of broke it down into 6 different areas. I talked about, setting expectations with your tenant right from the beginning. I talked about systems, the importance of having systems, it's overreactions. So be proactive rather than reactive. Communications, very important, because if you communicate well and you're empathetic, you can sometimes de-escalate a situation. I also talked about complaints, compliance, and inspections, that you don't want the city or the local government getting your business. So you got to avoid your tenants potentially calling them, because once they're involved, this is the local government. It usually goes downhill from there. And then finally, I talked about boundaries and controls, and also using complaints to strengthen the portfolio. So my friends, that's it for today. Hope you had a good week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. I'm getting ready to go. Well, I'll probably share it next week. I've got my first planned vacation. I think I'm going to do it in January of next year. So I'll talk about that maybe next week. So anyway, either way, hope you had a good evening. Hope you're having a great week, and I will see you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Take care, guys. Bye for now.